I need to tell you something about Libra that most people completely misunderstand. And honestly, this misconception has probably cost more relationships and friendships than almost any other astrological myth out there. Everyone thinks Libra is this perpetually calm, balanced, diplomatic sign that never gets angry. The peacemaker, the harmonizer, the one who always sees both sides and never loses their cool. And sure, that's part of the picture. But here's what nobody tells you. When Libra finally snaps, when they reach that breaking point that everyone assumed didn't exist, the explosion is unlike anything you've ever witnessed from any other sign. I've seen it happen. I've experienced it myself. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of a Libra's rage after pushing them too far, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That moment when the scales finally tip so far in one direction that there's no going back. That instant when years of patience, compromise, and swallowed frustration come pouring out in a torrent of words so precise, so cutting, so devastatingly accurate that you're left standing there wondering what just happened. Because here's the thing about Libra's temper that makes it so uniquely powerful. They don't just get angry. They don't just yell or throw things or storm off. When Libra loses it, they dismantle you, systematically, intellectually, with the kind of clarity that only comes from someone who's been watching, analyzing, and holding back for far too long. And the wildest part? Most people never see it coming. They think because Libra has been patient for so long, because they've accommodated and compromised and kept the peace through situation after situation, that they'll just keep doing it forever, that Libra doesn't have a limit, that you can keep pushing and pushing and there will never be consequences. That's the fatal mistake. So if you've been feeling this strange tension with a Libra in your life lately, if you've noticed them getting quieter, more withdrawn, less willing to engage, I really want you to pay attention to what I'm about to share. Because those aren't signs that everything is fine. Those are warning signals that you're approaching the edge of something you don't want to cross. Now, before we dive into the 6 specific rigors that make Libra snap, I need you to understand something fundamental about how this sign operates. And this was a huge revelation for me when I finally grasped it. Libra isn't actually conflict avoidant because they're weak or scared. They avoid conflict because they understand something most people don't. They know that once they engage, once they stop holding back, the damage will be irreversible. Think about it. Libra is ruled by Venus, the planet of love, beauty, and harmony. But Venus isn't just about sweetness and light. Venus also rules values, worth, and justice. And when those Venusian principles get violated, when someone crosses the line from disagreement into disrespect, from debate into injustice, something shifts in Libra's entire energy field. The scales that usually balance so carefully, they don't just tip, they shatter. And here's what makes this so intense. Libra is an air sign. That means their primary mode of processing the world is through thought, through analysis, through observation. While you've been thinking Libra is just going along with things, just being easygoing and flexible, they've actually been cataloging everything, every slight, every inconsistency, every moment where you showed them who you really are. They've been building a case, and when they finally present it, when they finally decide you've crossed one line too many, they don't just express anger, they deliver a verdict. And trust me, Libra's verdicts are final. I've watched this happen in relationships, in friendships, in professional settings. The person who seemed so understanding, so willing to work things out, suddenly becomes completely unmovable. Not because they're being stubborn, not because they're overreacting, but because they've reached a conclusion based on accumulated evidence that you've been providing them all along. Does that resonate? Have you seen this pattern before? Now let's talk about what actually triggers this response. Because understanding these triggers isn't just about avoiding Libra's anger. It's about understanding what Libra actually values at their core, what they're willing to tolerate and what crosses into territory they simply cannot accept. The first trigger, and honestly this is the big one that most people completely miss, is injustice. Not just injustice toward them personally, but injustice anywhere in their field of vision. And I'm not talking about minor unfairness or small inequities. I'm talking about situations where someone is being genuinely wronged, where power is being abused, where the scales are so obviously imbalanced that it becomes impossible to ignore. Here's what happens. Libra will initially try to address it diplomatically. They'll point out the imbalance. They'll suggest solutions. They'll attempt to mediate. But if the injustice continues, strange, if the person perpetrating it shows no willingness to correct course, something fundamental shifts in how Libra sees that person. And this is crucial to understand. When Libra witnesses ongoing injustice, especially when they've tried to address it peacefully and been ignored, they don't just get angry at the specific situation. They lose respect for you as a person. They recategorize you in their mind from someone worth engaging with to someone who has revealed their true character. And once that recategorization happens, there's no going back. I've seen this play out in workplace situations where a Libra watched a colleague being mistreated by management. At first, the Libra tried to advocate, tried to bring attention to the problem through proper channels. But when nothing changed, when the injustice continued and the people in power showed they simply didn't care, the Libra didn't just quit. They systematically documented everything, built an airtight case, and took it to the level where real consequences could happen. That's the thing about Libra's response to injustice. It's not half-hearted, it's not impulsive, it's calculated, strategic, and absolutely devastating to the person who thought they could get away with unfair treatment. Or think about personal relationships. Maybe you've seen a Libra friend watch their partner treat service workers rudely, dismiss people they consider beneath them, or show casual cruelty to those who can't fight back. The Libra might not say anything in the moment. They might even seem fine. But internally, they're filing that information away. They're watching how you treat people when you think it doesn't matter. And they're drawing conclusions about who you really are. And here's what makes this trigger so powerful. Libra doesn't need the injustice to be directed at them personally to react to it. In fact, sometimes they're more likely to snap over injustice done to someone else than over something done to them directly. Because when it's about them, they can rationalize. They can compromise. They can find ways to maintain peace. But when they see someone else being harmed, especially someone vulnerable or powerless, that protective instinct kicks in with a force that surprises everyone, including sometimes the Libra themselves. I remember watching a Libra friend who had been nothing but patient and understanding with a mutual acquaintance for years. This person was constantly making excuses, constantly creating drama, constantly demanding emotional labor from everyone around them. And my Libra friend kept showing up, kept trying to help, kept giving chance after chance, until the day that person turned their manipulation tactics on someone younger, someone who didn't have the tools to defend themselves. The transformation was instant. The Libra who had been so accommodating, so willing to see the best in this person, suddenly became ice cold. Not loud, not dramatic, just completely, utterly done. They cut that person off with a precision that was almost surgical. No long explanation, no emotional processing. Just a clear, firm boundary that communicated this is over and there's nothing you can say that will change my mind. That's what injustice does to Libra. It doesn't just make them angry. It makes them decisive in a way that shocks people who are used to their usual diplomatic approach. The second trigger is closely related but distinct. And it's one that catches people off guard because they don't realize how deeply Libra values it. I'm talking about hypocrisy, specifically. When someone preaches one set of values but lives by another. When someone demands standards from others that they don't apply to themselves. When someone's words and actions are so fundamentally misaligned that it becomes impossible to take them seriously. Now, here's what you need to understand about why this triggers Libra so intensely. Libra is constantly working to maintain internal consistency. They're always checking themselves, always trying to ensure their actions align with their stated values, always striving for that balance between what they believe and how they behave. It's exhausting work, honestly, and when they see someone else not even attempting that level of self-awareness, not even trying to live up to the standards they demand from others, it creates this visceral reaction. Because to Libra, hypocrisy isn't just annoying, it's a fundamental violation of fairness. It's someone trying to rig the game, to hold others to rules they themselves refuse to follow. And remember, Libra's entire worldview is built on the concept of balance, of equal treatment, of consistent standards applied fairly. I've watched this play out in so many contexts. The parent who demands respect from their children but shows none in return. The boss who preaches work-life balance while sending emails at midnight and expecting immediate responses. The friend who constantly gives advice about healthy relationships while treating their own partner terribly. The activist who speaks eloquently about justice while behaving cruelly to people in their personal life. Libra will tolerate a lot of things. They'll work with difficult personalities. They'll accommodate different communication styles. They'll find ways to bridge seemingly incompatible viewpoints. But hypocrisy, that's where their patience runs out. Because you can't negotiate with hypocrisy. You can't find middle ground with someone who's operating from a fundamentally dishonest position. And here's what makes Libra's response to hypocrisy so cutting. They don't just call you out on the specific instance. They connect the dots. They show you the pattern. They present you with a comprehensive analysis of all the ways your words and actions don't match up, delivered with such clarity and precision that you can't deny it, can't deflect it, can't explain it away. I've been in conversations where a Libra, after months or even years of observing someone's hypocritical behavior, finally reached their limit and laid it all out. Not with yelling, not with emotion, just with facts, with examples, with timestamps and receipts and a level of detailed observation that made it clear they'd been paying attention to everything all along. The person on the receiving end usually tries to defend themselves, tries to explain away each individual instance. But that's when they realize the trap they've walked into. Because Libra isn't presenting isolated incidents. They're showing you a pattern. And patterns are much harder to dismiss than single events. I've carefully reviewed the first round content and understand the narrative flow and style. I'll now continue from where it left off, maintaining the conversational, insightful tone while exploring 23 new court rigors that make LIBRASNAP. Let me write the middle third of the script. This is why you'll sometimes see a Libra who's been quiet for months suddenly deliver what feels like a prepared speech. Because in a way, they've been mentally composing it every time you demonstrated the gap between what you say and what you do. Every time you demanded something from others while exempting yourself. Every time you positioned yourself as morally superior while behaving in ways that contradicted your stated principles. And the devastating part? Libra doesn't do this to hurt you. They do it because they genuinely believed, for a long time, that maybe you just didn't see the inconsistency. That maybe if they pointed it out clearly enough, you'd recognize it and change. But when it becomes obvious that you see it and simply don't care, that you're comfortable with the double standard, that's when something breaks in how they view you. I knew a Libra who worked with someone who constantly talked about integrity, about doing the right thing, about being a person of principle. This person would give these inspiring speeches about ethics and values. But behind closed doors, they were cutting corners, taking credit for others' work, and throwing colleagues under the bus to protect themselves. The Libra watched this for almost 2 years, trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, trying to believe the public persona was the real one, until one day, in a meeting, this person tried to take credit for a project the Libra had led, and something in the Libra just snapped. Not into yelling or drama, into absolute clarity. They calmly, methodically, in front of everyone, laid out exactly what had happened, who had done what, with documentation and timestamps. And then, and this is the part that made everyone in the room uncomfortable, they connected it to every other instance where this person had done something similar. They showed the pattern. They revealed the hypocrisy. And they did it so calmly, so factually, that there was no way to dismiss it as emotional overreaction. The person tried to laugh it off, tried to say the Libra was being too sensitive, was making a big deal out of nothing. But everyone in that room had just watched someone's carefully constructed image get dismantled with surgical precision. And the Libra? They weren't angry anymore. They were done. They'd said what needed to be said, presented the evidence, and now they were simply moving forward as if that person no longer existed in any meaningful way. That's the thing about Libra's response to hypocrisy. It's not about revenge. It's about truth. It's about refusing to participate in someone else's delusion about who they are. And once Libra decides they're done participating, there's no amount of apology or explanation that will change their mind. Because they've seen who you really are, and they've decided that person isn't worth their continued investment. Now, the third trigger is one that I think surprises people because it seems so simple on the surface. But it cuts deeper than almost anything else. I'm talking about being taken for granted. And I don't mean the occasional oversight or the times when life gets busy and someone forgets to say thank you. I'm talking about the systematic, ongoing pattern of treating Libra's efforts, their times, their emotional labor, as if it's just expected, as if it's owed, as if it's not actually a choice they're making every single day to show up for you. Here's what happens with Libra. They're natural givers. They want harmony. They want everyone to be happy, and they're willing to put in significant effort to create that. They'll be the one who remembers everyone's birthday, who checks in when you're going through something hard, who mediates conflicts, who makes sure everyone feels included. They'll do this consistently, reliably, often without being asked, and for a while, that feels good to them. It aligns with their values. It creates the harmonious environment they crave. But here's what most people don't realize. Libra is keeping track, not in a petty, scorekeeping way, but they're aware of the balance. They're noticing whether their efforts are reciprocated, whether their presence is valued, whether the people they're investing in would do the same for them. And when the answer becomes clearly, consistently no, when it becomes obvious that people have started treating their generosity as an entitlement rather than a gift, something fundamental shifts. The scales tip, and suddenly, Libra starts pulling back. At first, it's subtle. They might take a little longer to respond to messages. They might be less available for last-minute plans. They might stop being the one who always initiates, who always reaches out, who always makes sure everyone's okay. And this is where most people make their fatal mistake. Instead of noticing the shift and adjusting their behavior, they get annoyed. They complain that Libra is being distant, is changing, isn't the same person they used to be. And that's when Libra realizes you never actually valued them. You valued what they did for you. You valued the service they provided, the emotional support they offered, the effort they put in. But you didn't value them as a person with their own needs, their own limits, their own requirement for reciprocity. I watched this happen with a Libra friend who had been the glue holding together a friend group for years. She organized everything, remembered everyone's preferences, made sure no one felt left out, mediated every conflict, checked in with everyone individually. She did this for years. And slowly, she started to notice that when she needed support, when she was going through something difficult, the response was minimal. People were busy. People had their own stuff going on. People assumed she was fine because she always seemed fine. She didn't say anything at first. She just started pulling back, stopped organizing the group hangouts, stopped being the one to reach out, stopped putting in all that invisible emotional labor that had been holding everything together. And you know what happened? The group started falling apart. People complained that no one was making plans anymore. They wondered why everyone felt so disconnected. But not one person stopped to think about the fact that all of that connection had been maintained by one person's consistent, unreciprocated effort. When someone finally asked her why she'd become so distant, she didn't yell. She didn't list grievances. She just said something that I think perfectly captures this trigger. She said, "I realized I was the only one who would notice if I disappeared. And I decided I didn't want to be in relationships where my absence wouldn't even register." That's what being taken for granted does to Libra. It doesn't make them angry in the traditional sense. It makes them clear, crystal clear about where they actually stand in your life. And once they see it, once they understand that their effort has been one-sided, they don't try to fix it. They don't try to make you see what you've been missing. They just quietly redirect that energy toward people and situations that actually value it. And here's what makes this trigger so painful for the people on the receiving end. By the time they realize what's happened, by the time they notice that Libra has pulled back, it's usually too late, because Libra doesn't make that decision lightly. They don't pull back on a whim. They pull back after months or years of noticing the imbalance, of hoping it would change, of giving you countless opportunities to show up for them the way they've shown up for you. So when they finally withdraw, when they finally stop being the one who holds everything together, they're not doing it to punish you or to make a point. They're doing it because they've accepted the reality of the situation. They've accepted that this relationship, this friendship, this dynamic is not what they thought it was, and they're choosing to invest their energy elsewhere. And it's something that can turn a patient, understanding Libra into someone you barely recognize. I'm talking about intellectual dishonesty, not just being wrong about something, not just having a different opinion, but actively distorting truth, manipulating information, or arguing in bad faith. Libra is an air sign, which means they live in the realm of ideas, of concepts, of intellectual exchange. They genuinely enjoy debate. They like exploring different perspectives. They're often the person who can argue multiple sides of an issue because they can genuinely see the validity in different viewpoints. But there's a crucial distinction here. They can engage with different perspectives when those perspectives are being presented honestly. When the person is genuinely trying to understand truth rather than just win an argument. But when someone starts twisting facts, moving goalposts, using logical fallacies, or deliberately misrepresenting information to serve their agenda, Libra's entire demeanor changes. Because to them, that's not just annoying. It's a violation of the social contract that makes meaningful communication possible. It's someone poisoning the well of discourse, making it impossible to actually reach understanding or resolution. I've seen this play out in political discussions, in workplace debates, in personal arguments. The Libra starts out engaged, interested, willing to hear the other person out. But as it becomes clear that the other person isn't actually interested in truth or understanding, that they're just trying to win by any means necessary, you can almost see the Libra's energy shift. They get quieter, more focused, and then they start dismantling the argument with a precision that's almost surgical. They'll point out the logical fallacies. They'll identify the places where the person contradicted themselves. They'll ask questions that expose the holes in the reasoning, and they'll do it all with this calm, almost clinical detachment that makes it clear they're not emotionally invested in winning. They're invested in exposing dishonesty. What makes this particularly devastating is that Libra has usually been paying very close attention to how the person argues, what tactics they use, where their reasoning breaks down. So when they finally engage, they're not just responding to the current argument. They're addressing the entire pattern of intellectual dishonesty they've observed. I remember a Libra colleague who sat through months of meetings where a particular manager would consistently misrepresent data to support their preferred outcomes. The Libra would occasionally ask clarifying questions, would gently point out inconsistencies, but mostly just observed. Until one day, in a crucial meeting with senior leadership, that manager tried the same tactic, and the Libra, who had been quiet for most of the meeting, calmly asked if they could present an alternative analysis. What followed was a masterclass in intellectual honesty. The Libra didn't attack the manager personally. They didn't get emotional. They simply presented the actual data, showed where the manager's interpretation had been misleading, and offered a more accurate analysis. They did it so professionally, so factually, that there was no way to dismiss it as a personal attack or emotional reaction. It was just truth, presented clearly and irrefutably. The manager tried to defend their position, tried to explain away the discrepancies, but the Libra had anticipated every defense, had prepared responses to every likely objection, not because they were trying to humiliate anyone, but because they genuinely believed that decisions should be based on accurate information, and they were willing to put in the work to ensure that happened. That's what intellectual dishonesty does to Libra. It activates this part of them that's deeply committed to truth and fairness in discourse. And once activated, that part doesn't back down. It doesn't compromise. It doesn't let things slide for the sake of keeping the peace. Because to Libra, there can be no real peace built on a foundation of lies or manipulation. The fifth trigger is one that I think is particularly insidious because it often happens gradually, almost imperceptibly, until suddenly it's everywhere and Libra can't ignore it anymore. I'm talking about disrespect disguised as honesty. You know what I mean. The person who says brutally hurtful things and then defends it with "I'm just being honest" or "I'm just telling it like it is." As if cruelty becomes acceptable when you label it as truth-telling. Libra values honesty. They really do. They'd rather hear a difficult truth than a comfortable lie. But here's what they understand that a lot of people don't. Honesty and cruelty are not the same thing. You can be truthful without being brutal. You can be direct without being disrespectful. And when someone consistently chooses the cruel version of honesty, when they seem to take pleasure in delivering hard truths in the most hurtful way possible, Libra sees right through it. Because that's not honesty. That's aggression wearing honesty's mask. It's someone who wants to hurt you but doesn't want to be held accountable for it. And Libra, who spends so much time and energy trying to communicate difficult things in ways that preserve dignity and respect, has zero patience for people who weaponize truth. I've watched Libras tolerate a lot of difficult personalities. They'll work with people who are blunt, people who are direct, people who don't sugarcoat things. But there's a line between being direct and being cruel. And when someone crosses that line repeatedly, when it becomes clear that they're choosing to be hurtful, Libra's tolerance evaporates. What's particularly interesting about this trigger is how Libra responds to it. They don't usually match the cruelty. They don't fight fire with fire. Instead, they get incredibly formal, incredibly polite, incredibly distant. They create this wall of courtesy that's somehow more cutting than any insult could be. Because what they're communicating is, "You've shown me you can't be trusted with access to my real self, so you're getting the public version only. And that's all you'll ever get from me again." I knew a Libra who had a family member who constantly made cutting remarks disguised as jokes or honest observations. For years, the Libra tried to address it gently, tried to explain how the comments landed, tried to give this person opportunities to adjust their behavior, but the person kept doing it. Kept hiding behind "I'm just being honest" or "Can't you take a joke?" Finally, at a family gathering, after another one of these comments, the Libra just looked at this person and said, with perfect calm, "I've realized that your version of honesty is just cruelty you don't want to be held accountable for, and I'm no longer interested in pretending otherwise. From now on, we can keep our interactions surface level and polite, or we can not interact at all." The room went silent. The family member tried to laugh it off, tried to say the Libra was being too sensitive. But the Libra didn't engage. They'd said what needed to be said, set the boundary, and that was that. And from that point forward, their interactions with that person were exactly as promised. Polite, surface level, and completely devoid of the warmth and openness that had been there before. That's what disrespect disguised as honesty does to Libra. It doesn't make them cruel in return. It makes them unavailable. It makes them withdraw the gift of their authentic presence. And once that gift is withdrawn, once Libra decides you've proven you can't be trusted with their vulnerability, there's no getting it back. The sixth and final trigger is perhaps the most devastating of all. And it's one that I think reveals the deepest truth about what Libra actually needs in their relationships. I'm talking about the moment when Libra realizes that someone has been performing care rather than actually caring. When they discover that all the gestures, all the words, all the apparent consideration was just theater designed to get something from them. Not genuine investment in who they are as a person. This one cuts so deep because Libra gives people the benefit of the doubt for so long. They want to believe in the goodness of others. They want to trust that when someone shows care, it's real, so they'll overlook inconsistencies. They'll make excuses for behavior that doesn't quite add up. They'll convince themselves that they're just being paranoid or overly analytical. But here's what happens. Libra is always watching, always noticing, and over time, they start to see the pattern. They notice that the person only shows care when they need something. That the concern evaporates the moment Libra's usefulness runs out. That the friendship or relationship only exists on terms that benefit the other person. And the moment Libra has needs of their own, suddenly that person is nowhere to be found. I've seen this play out in romantic relationships where someone love-bombed a Libra, showered them with attention and affection and grand gestures, made them feel like they'd finally found someone who truly saw them. And the Libra, who'd been so careful, so analytical with everyone else, let their guard down. They believed it was real, until slowly, gradually, the mask started slipping. The grand gestures stopped once the Libra was committed. The attentiveness disappeared once they were secure in the relationship. The person who had seemed so interested in Libra's thoughts and feelings suddenly had no patience for listening, and Libra started to realize that they'd been sold a performance, not offered a genuine connection. What makes this trigger so uniquely painful is that it forces Libra to confront something they really don't want to believe. That they were fooled. That their usually reliable ability to read people, to see through facades, failed them. That they invested deeply in something that was never real to begin with. And the response, when it comes, is unlike anything else. Because this isn't about anger at a specific action or disappointment in a particular behavior. This is about the fundamental betrayal of trust. This is about someone who deliberately manipulated Libra's desire for genuine connection, who exploited their willingness to believe in people's better nature. I watched a Libra friend go through this with someone they'd considered their closest confidant for years. This person had been there through everything, or so it seemed. They'd listened to every problem, offered advice, been a constant presence. And my Libra friend had reciprocated fully, had been equally present, equally supportive, equally invested, until one day, my friend was going through something genuinely difficult and reached out for support. And this person, who had always been so available before, suddenly wasn't. They were busy. They had their own stuff going on. They'd get back to my friend later. Except later never came. And that's when my Libra friend started really looking at the pattern of their friendship. Started noticing that this person was always available when they needed something, when they wanted to vent, when they needed advice or support or just someone to validate their feelings. But the moment my friend needed the same, suddenly this person had boundaries, had limits, had reasons why they couldn't show up. The realization was devastating, not just because of the specific situation, but because it meant Rake and Tekshaping's years of friendship. It meant understanding that what they'd thought was mutual care had actually been a one-sided dynamic where my friend was providing emotional labor and this person was consuming it, giving back just enough to keep the arrangement going but never actually reciprocating in any meaningful way. When my Libra friend finally confronted this person, they didn't yell. They didn't list every instance of disappointment. They simply said, "I've realized that you've been treating our friendship like a service I provide rather than a relationship between equals. And I'm not interested in continuing that dynamic." The person tried to defend themselves, tried to explain that they'd been going through a hard time, that they hadn't meant to be unavailable, that they really did care. But my friend just looked at them with this expression of profound sadness and said, "If you cared, you would have shown up. Not perfectly, not every time, right? But consistently enough that I'd know I mattered to you, and you didn't, so now I know." That was it. The friendship was over. Not with drama. Not with a big blow-up. Just with clarity. With the recognition that what my friend had thought existed had never actually been there. And once Libra sees that, once they understand that someone has been performing care rather than actually caring, there's no going back, because they can't unsee it. They can't unknow what they now know about how little they actually meant to that person. This trigger is particularly devastating because it strikes at the core of what Libra values most. They can handle conflict. They can handle disagreement. They can even handle anger and frustration. But they cannot handle inauthenticity in relationships. They cannot handle the discovery that someone has been lying about the fundamental nature of their connection. And here's what I think is so important to understand about all 6 of these triggers. They're not about Libra being oversensitive or demanding or impossible to please. They're about Libra having clear standards for how people should treat each other, and refusing to accept less than those standards once they've been violated enough times. Every single one of these triggers comes down to the same core issue. Someone has demonstrated, through their actions, that they don't actually value fairness, honesty, reciprocity, or genuine connection. They've shown that they're willing to exploit Libra's patience, to take advantage of their desire for harmony, to treat their care and effort as something they're entitled to rather than something they need to earn and maintain. And once Libra sees that pattern clearly, once they understand that this is who you are rather than just how you're acting in this moment, something fundamental changes. The scales don't just tip. They lock into place, and the verdict is final. I think what surprises people most about Libra's anger is how permanent it is. They expect that because Libra is usually so willing to forgive, so eager to restore harmony, that eventually things will go back to normal. That if they just wait it out, if they apologize enough, if they promise to do better, Libra will soften and let them back in. But that's not how it works. Because Libra's anger isn't emotional in the way most people understand anger. It's not hot and reactive and likely to cool down over time. It's cold and analytical and based on a rational assessment of your character. And you can't apologize your way out of someone's rational conclusion about who you are. I've seen people try. I've watched them attempt to win back a Libra who's decided they're done. They send long messages explaining themselves. They make grand gestures. They promise they've changed. And the Libra just remains unmoved. Not because they're being stubborn or holding a grudge, but because they've already processed everything. They've already reached their conclusion. And nothing you're saying now changes the evidence they've accumulated over months or years of watching your behavior. This is what makes Libra's temper so uniquely powerful. It's not about the explosion. It's about the aftermath. It's about the way they can look at you with perfect calm and communicate, without saying a word, that you no longer exist to them in any meaningful way, that you've been categorized from person of value to person who revealed their true character, and that categorization is permanent. I think the lesson here, if there is one, is that Libra's patience should never be mistaken for weakness. Their willingness to see your side, to give you chances, to try to work things out. That's not because they're pushovers. It's because they genuinely believe in fairness, in giving people the opportunity to do better, in not writing someone off over a single mistake. But there's a limit. There's always a limit. And the people who push past that limit, who take advantage of Libra's good nature until there's nothing left to take advantage of, they're always shocked when they finally hit the wall. When they realize that the person who seems so endlessly patient has actually been keeping a very careful accounting of every transgression, every broken promise, every moment where they showed their true colors. And by the time Libra snaps, by the time they finally reach that breaking point, it's not really a snap at all. It's a door closing, quietly, firmly, permanently, and no amount of knocking will get them to open it again. So if you have a Libra in your life, if you value that relationship, here's what I want you to understand. Don't test their limits. Don't assume their patience is infinite. Don't take their care and effort for granted. Don't treat their desire for harmony as permission to behave badly without consequences. Because Libra will tolerate a lot. They'll work with you through difficulties. They'll give you chances to grow and change. They'll try to see the best in you even when you're not showing it. But they're also watching. They're also noticing. They're also keeping track of whether you're actually trying to be better or just trying to get away with being exactly who you've always been. And the moment they conclude it's the latter, the moment they decide you've shown them your true character and it's not something they can respect or invest in anymore,